Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast on this 7th of April 2019. We are recording, of course, streaming live here on YouTube. As always, we are sponsored by All Calculated Measures Clothing, ACM, by Adrian McDonald. Confidence, discipline, consistency, all traits of all calculated measures. Shout out to Adrian McDonald. We hope to have him on the program in a few weeks. Of course, you can find this on Blog Talk Radio, Stitcher, iTunes, a number of different platforms over the course. When the program's concluded, the YouTube stream will be available anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes after the program is over. And we begin with the Final Four. National championship is set for tomorrow. Texas Tech and Virginia, two teams that before the season started, maybe you thought Virginia could make a run and get here. Texas Tech, you did not think that could be one of the teams that could be playing for a national championship. But Texas Tech right now playing as well as any team in the country. And let me begin with the Auburn Michigan State game. The Auburn Virginia game, because that was clearly the most dramatic. I don't even call it controversial, but most dramatic and the better of the two games. I never thought, even though Texas Tech, the lead got cut down to 3, never thought Michigan State was ever in that game in the second half. Texas Tech took complete control of that game in the second half, and we're in total control of it. But strange game with Auburn, Virginia. Thought Auburn was in great shape at halftime, being up by 3 and not making threes. There was going to be a point in that game where Auburn got hot from the 3-point line, and it came in the late in the second half that helped them erase a 10-point deficit with 5 minutes to go. They got hot from the 3-point line. Next thing you know, a 10-point deficit turns. 10-point lead, Virginia lead turns into a 4-point deficit, and Virginia looked at that point completely shell-shocked, as it looked like Auburn was going to make their way towards the national championship game. You get a sequence of events that if you're an Auburn fan, you won't ever forget about. One, you get the non-double dribble call. The ball, Ty Jerome, the ball hits off his foot. Apparently, of course, again, I didn't know about this rule, and I'm sure a number of people didn't know about this rule. Just as you're a casual basketball observer, even if you're a fan, that the ball hits off the offensive player's foot, that they cannot pick up the ball. They cannot be the first one to touch the ball and not be a double dribble. He clearly was the first one to touch the ball. Again, that should have been called a double dribble. That wasn't called. That was the beginning of it. Then you had the Kyle Guy 3-point shot from the corner, which was the biggest shot in the game. Down by 4, he makes a 3. If he misses that shot, all Auburn has to do is make one free throw to go up by 4 or possibly even up by 5. Game over. And then, of course, you had the 3-point shot in the corner where the foul was called on Brown. I think it was It wasn't Harper. It was Brown, and Brown, who made some big 3-point shots down the stretch, helped Auburn retake the lead and almost take control of the game. It was clearly a foul. And listen, you hate for a game to be decided, or have a chance to be decided on the official's call. But if you're an official, you have to make that call. He bumped him in the air. The one thing that in basketball that we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years in both pro and college, officials have been consistent with protecting the shooter. So you can disagree from a call about the charge calls and about carrying some stuff like that. You cannot. Officiating has been consistent about protecting the shooter. You cannot bump the shooter in the air. You have to allow a shooter to land even after the shot has been released. It was clear that he bumped him in the air, and that, to me, that wasn't controversial to me. That call had to be made. It was the right call. Give Kyle Guy all the credit in the world for making the free throws. Those are clutch free throws to make with the game on the line. Now he had a little wiggle room He had room to miss one, so it's not like a situation where they were down by three and he had to make all three. But still, making all three, being down by two, was definitely clutch on his part. He makes those three free throws. He made the big 3-point shot. So a big, 8 to 10 seconds for one Kyle guy that helped Virginia get to the championship game. Now, if Auburn wants to be despondent or overwhelmed or angry about any of those calls, it has to be on the non-double dribble call. That call has to be made. You cannot, if you're official in the Final Four. You're officiating there for a reason. You are at the top of your game, or otherwise you wouldn't be allowed to have that particular assignment. So those are the best of the best that are doing these games. These Final Four, these last three games of the of the season, Final Four and national championship tomorrow. So you have to know you can't miss that call. Like now again, I didn't think of it when it happened uh, in game and in real time. It wasn't until the post game where you had Stragitor, the ex NFL official, also ex college basketball official, break down what had transpired and break down the rule and say a double dribble should have been called on that. So that call cannot be made. If I was Auburn, I would be outraged by that call being missed. Not the foul call in the corner. Not the foul call that was called in the corner on the shot. With that being said, you know, it's a tough way to end the season. If you're Auburn looked like they were about. Listen, Virginia got bailed out in some cases because that looked like that was going to be one of the great collapses in recent Final Four history. They're up 10 with less than 5 minutes left. Auburn looks dead in the water, and all of a sudden a 10-point lead turns into a 4-point deficit for Virginia. And but again, they made enough plays. They didn't panic. Both their guards played well. Hunter had a big first half, had a big second half, didn't miss a shot. They held Auburn in check for the most part with the 3-point shooting. So give Virginia a lot of credit. Virginia has won a number of these close games recently. They against Oregon. We know they pulled a rabbit out their hat. Rabbit out their hat against Auburn. Against Purdue in the regional final. So Virginia has had a penchant in this tournament for winning these close games. A tough way to end the season for Auburn, but again, the right call was made. Guy made 3 big free throws. I've seen many of players miss key free throws in that spot before, so you got to give him all the credit in the world for making those free throws. And Virginia moves on to face a Texas Tech team that right now I think is playing the best basketball out of any team in the tournament. Texas Tech has been dominant in this tournament. They completely took Michigan State out of their offense last night. They dominated that second half. The guards played well. They took Cassius out of the game. Michigan State couldn't do anything in that game offensively. Offensively, outside of a late spurt that they had to close the game to 3, to close the gap to 3, and Michigan State had 3 different shots at tying the game. But even with that said, that was Texas Tech's game all the way in the second half. And again, Texas Tech quietly has played the best basketball in the tournament. I don't think there's any question about it. They dominated Michigan. They took apart where they were able to get by a Gonzaga team, which a lot of people thought that could win it all. They dominated Buffalo. I had them losing to Buffalo in the second round. I looked crazy with that pick. They dominated a good Buffalo team. We all know that made a nice run last year in the tournament to the Sweet 16. So this Texas Tech team is for real. I think this game on Monday night, we know will be a defensive game. It could be first to 55, could be first to 50. The over-under is like 118, which is like the lowest in the last 20 years. This will be the first championship for either one of these teams. This will be the first time that you've had 2 teams that have never been in a championship game facing off against each other. And this will be the first time going back to 2006 that a team will win their first national championship. Of course, the last team to win their first national championship in a title game was Florida back in 06, and they ended up winning back-to-back championships in 06 and 07. So again, I expect the game will be close. I know a lot of people are complaining about the lack of star power. despite the fact that you have two, in essence, in Culliver on Texas Tech and DeAndre Hunter, two guys that are going to be lottery picks, two guys that are probably going to be top 10 picks playing in that game. You have again no blue blood program in the final four, no Zion Williamson, so that has certainly hurt the final four as far as star power. Um, but this is the new This is the new age college basketball. Even when you have guys that are one and done, even when you have superstar players that are one and done guys who are going to be top five lottery picks, most of the teams that you're going to have winning these games or going to the Final Fours are senior, junior laden teams, veteran laden teams, teams that have been together for 2 to 3 years. And this is what college basketball probably is going to be looking like over the course of the future. You're going to have less star power and a lot, more emphasis on glue guys and role players and things of that nature. So, again, I expect this game to be very close. I expect it to be low scoring. Virginia is a 1 point favorite. Some in certain places they're 1 point, a point and a half favorite. So I would lean towards Virginia is going to be the favorite in this game, but I actually like Texas Tech in this game. I think Texas Tech matches up well with Virginia with their athleticism, with their size up front. I watched a lot of Virginia over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, and they've had struggle with long athletic teams in the tournament as well as during the ACC play, like a team like a Florida State. And I think Texas Tech, as good as Florida State is defensively, Texas Tech is a much better defensive team. Again, it's a toss-up game. It's a game that will be low scoring. It's a game where a 5 point lead will feel like a 10 point lead. The coaches, to me, Bennett is the most acclaimed of the two coaches, but Beard shouldn't take a backseat to anybody with the job he's done over the 3 years he's been at Texas Tech. He's went to back-to-back Elite Eights, and now he's a national championship game in his third year, turning a program that had no real history outside of a small stint from outside of a couple of good years in the mid '90s and Bobby Knight's last couple of years, which were decent at best. He really didn't do any damage there when he was finishing up his career at Texas Tech. So really, Chris Beard has turned this program completely around in the Big 12 and was deserving of Coaching of the Year without question. So I don't give any of the coaches, any one of those two coaches, a major advantage in the game. I expect a very, very close game, and looking forward to it. Again, this does not have the sex appeal of a blue blood or of a Carmelo Anthony in a championship or a classic battle like we saw 20 years ago with UConn and Duke. This is just not what college basketball is right now. But instead, you have two of the best defensive teams. You have two teams that are seeking title number one on come Monday night. Real Deal Podcast here on this Sunday. Starting the first, this is the first Sunday in a while. This first couple of days in a while where you can actually sense that spring is here with the weather. Even with the pollen, which is not fun at all. So the spring is here, and NHL and NBA playoffs are coming up. NHL playoffs will start Wednesday, the last week of the NBA season, which to me has taken forever. This is like one of the first years where you realize how long the NBA season is. I mean, NBA, like the fact that that the NBA has a week left, and that the playoffs won't start until next Saturday. You would think that the NBA season should have ended like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but most of the playoff spots have been clinched. You still have a battle for the Eastern Conference top bottom seeds with the 8th, 7th, and 8th. That still has yet to be decided. Orlando trying to make their first playoff appearance since the Dwight Howard left. In terms of the West, it still has to be decided who Golden State is going to play in the first round. It could either be San Antonio or OKC. I thought OKC was losing last time I checked this evening against Minnesota. So You rather see, I read NBA certainly rather see Kevin Durant versus Westbrook in the first round. That certainly is the more attractive, appealing of the matchups. Um, Milwaukee had a very good win against Philly on Thursday. That was a it was a great game. You saw the Greek and B going tit for tat, and I'll say this, the Greek Freak, and I listen. I'm not one who gets excited or goes or chooses the MVP based on a game to game basis. I thought that the Greek Freak has been the MVP for the better part of the season. I don't, I understand that Harden is deserving of the MVP in most years, but not this year. But the Greek Freak made a statement in that game as far as like, he came into that game talking about it was talks that he was bothered by the fact that Embiid made, those comments on the most unstoppable offensive player in the league. And the Greek Freak goes out there, goes 45, basically 45, 13, 5 assists and 5 block shots, with a Milwaukee team that we know that is a little bit shorthanded with the Brogdon and Miritich and a couple other injuries that they had. They go into a tough place to play. Philadelphia have been playing great at home, and they win a game, which they, kind of put them in the driver's seat for home court advantage, not only in the Eastern Conference, but in the entire league, even if they were to get to the finals. That was, he's killed Philly this year. And you look at Philadelphia, I'm as big as Ben Simmons fan as there is. Um, I defend Ben Simmons, despite the shooting, despite a lack of 3-point shooting. I heard some people say they should trade him for some shooters and what have you, which is ridiculous. But Ben Simmons, it has like I'm looking at the Greek Freak take 3-point shots. Now, the Greek Freak is not a jump shooter. But when he takes a shot, he believes that he's going to make the shot, and he will actually take the shot, even though he's a low percentage jump shooter and 3-point shooter. Ben Simmons doesn't even look to shoot. And to me, that's something that can't even like. It's one thing if you can't make, if you're not a great shooter. Russell Westbrook is not a great shooter, but if you're down by three, and Westbrook will look to shoot a three, and he actually believes that the shot is going to go in. You have to have if you're a player of that magnitude, you're a player with star potential, with all NBA type of talent, with generational talent, which I think Ben Simmons is. You have to believe that you're going to make the shot. You have to have the confidence to at least take the shot. And that is a major problem. It's not one thing. It's one thing for him to take the shot and not make it. But if I'm a team, teams are not even defending him to take shots, and that is something that is going to hurt Philadelphia in the playoffs. When you could just lay off him, pack the paint, or just focus in on other guys who will take shots. That's a big problem for Philadelphia. Ben Simmons, he has to get to a point to where, again, I'm not saying Ben Simmons has to ever become a great jump shooter or a 3-point shooter or a great 3-point shooter. I don't think he will ever be a great shooter, a 3-point shooter. But it has to get to a point to where he has to be willing to take those shots, to take shots outside of 10 feet, outside of 15 feet. Right now, with how their team is constructed, he can kind of be just a primary facilitator. They have a number of scorers. They have 4 other guys who are averaging 17 points or more. They're the first team in NBA history to have 5 guys who average, along with himself, who are averaging 17 points in a season. So you have a bunch of scoring, whereas Embiid, Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick, and they even have guys, some of their role players like Mike Scott, and those guys can shoot and score. So they have a number. He has a number of scores around him. But in the postseason, teams are going to sag off him, pack the paint, make it tougher for Embiid, clog the driving lanes for Butler or Tobias Harris. The shooting, they're going to be up on JJ Redick, trying to staying glued to him. So, for Ben Simmons, for the Philadelphia to go to a next level as far as becoming a team that can win a championship. It's not only going to have to be with the coaching. I think coaching is a big part of it as well. I've never been a big Brent Brown fan whatsoever, but I think Ben Simmons is going to have to be willing to take shots, even if he does, even if they don't go in. He has to be willing to take shots. That really stood out to me, big time in that Philadelphia Milwaukee game. I'm not saying that was the reason why they lost that game. Uh, the Greek Freak took over. Milwaukee got hot from the three, and they're just much better coach. They are just way Budenholzer versus Brett Brown is no comparison as far as I'm concerned. Philadelphia should be the class of the East based on talent. We all know this that they had the most talent, but as far as coaching, they are at a deficiency as far as coaching. In my eyes, when it comes to Brett Brown versus a Brad Stevens or a Mike Budenholzer, even the guy from Nick Nurse from Toronto, who we will see what he's made of as a coach during the postseason. But with all that being said, the NBA season cannot end soon enough. The playoffs cannot get here quick enough. It's been a marathon to a point to where I think maybe they should even start the season off like in beginning of October, if it can and end it, in the season maybe, at the end of March or something. But the NBA season has taken forever this year. But the playoffs are less than a week away. We'll be starting next Saturday. Of course, a week has went past. A week has gone by with the tragic death of one, of course, Nipsey Hussle. There's been a lot of mixed, lot of questions about why people have been, trying to, again, continuing on with these conspiracy theories, the Dr. Sebi government and all that nonsense. But I think that, following, as a week has gone by, I think it's about, to me, it's about how do you build. It's about, like, there's no moving on from this, from a standpoint of, he's dead and he's not coming back, and you hope that you hope that this doesn't lead to further violence in Los Angeles, but how to build off his legacy and what he had left behind, his business savvy and what he done for the community. How do you take away from that and lead into good things moving on into the future? And I think that to me is going to be something that that's going to be something to look forward to in the future. Um, will he inspire a generation of young people to go out there and start their own businesses, or go out there and give back to their communities, or go out there and invest in themselves as well as investing in their communities? Because what you don't want to happen is, and it seems like this might not happen, that you don't want this to be a forgotten story. Someone else comes up, takes all the steam out of it, or makes us forget about it, and we move on, and then it's like we don't start honoring him, or we don't start recognizing him until like it's a year later, and March 31st of 2020. Oh, this is the year anniversary of Nipsey Hussle's death, and things of that nature. Or when BET Awards or award show, oh yeah, Nipsey, rest in peace, Nipsey, stuff like that. No, we that, and that's going to happen. But there has to be a situation where if you have to promote to young people and say, look at this guy's life. He started out, he was in the Crips, the Rolling Crips, he was in the Rolling Clips 60 gang. As a teenager, he evolved into a entrepreneur, father. He evolved into someone who invested in his community, given to STEM programs, and was really on his way to really being a borderline revolutionary. I mean, he was on his way to becoming that kind of figure that went beyond hip hop and went beyond hip hop. I mean, this guy there was no telling what his life would, what the rest of his life, the next 5 to 10 to 20 years would look like, had his life not been taken, so tragically and just without even thought by one Eric Holder. So to me, it's about building off the legacy that he left behind, and there's a lot of meat on the bone. There's a lot to be learned from, um, learned by his legacy, some of the things that he's done, a lot with things that he was able to accomplish. Now, I cannot answer the question. I can try to answer the question, but I don't have there's no perfect answer to, um, and this guy, I heard this a lot over the course of the week. When you get to a certain point of fame, celebrity, you know, should you give back or stay in your community, and stay commit to your community, either there or from afar? I can't answer that question. I think that, to me, that's up to the specific person. That's up to a person. Like, if you want to commit to the community, if you want to stay in your community, if you don't want to move out of your community, that's a you choice. I do believe we've seen artists, whether it's Jay-Z and other artists, other people, move out of their communities and still contribute to their communities and still do a lot of great things. So I don't think you have to necessarily live in your community to contribute to it or to make a difference. But Nipsey was a different type of dude. He was a different type of person from that standpoint. He had no fear of someone taking his life. He didn't worry about, walking around with a lot of bodyguards and what have you. Now, again, he had the respect of the streets for the most part. He had the respect of the people around his community. But, as we've seen many times before, all it takes is one jealous guy, one hater, one insecure person to change a generation, to change lives. And that's what Eric Holder did. Eric Holder changed lives. He affected lives, not just one life, but hundreds and maybe thousands of lives, when he did what he did last Sunday. And thankfully, the police got to him before the streets got to him. Um, Before the streets got to him, and who knows? His life could still be on the clock, even in prison. It's not like, trust me, he can be certainly gotten to in prison. And I don't wish anything upon Eric Holder. Eric Holder obviously is a guy with a lot of pain. He's a lot of pain. That's something that you don't come back from. Uh, Taking a life in the way in the manner that he did take Nipsey's life. Listen, Eric Holder, his day. I'm not even thinking about Eric Holder from that standpoint. But again, we, as African Americans, as the communities, have to find we have to find a way to cultivate, to develop the next set or generation of Nipsey Hussles. In our own way, we have to figure out how can we be Nipsey Hussle like, in terms of developing, and it's not from just business, but just in terms of investing in the community, investing in ourselves. Because before Nipsey Hussle invested into his community, he invested into himself as a person, as a person, not just as an artist, but as a man, as a human being. If he doesn't invest in himself, there's no way that he invested in his community to the level that he did. And again, I just don't want him to be forgotten. I just don't want this to be a situation where, again, where we only talk about him once a year or at an award show or during tributes or things of that nature. I think that his legacy should carry on years, not only decades into the future. There was a story that came out in the Bleacher Report in regards to Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy that really gave you everything that you need to know about the dynamics and the inner workings of a failed relationship, and maybe even insight into why the Green Bay Packers underachieved, despite having a quarterback who we know is a generational talent, and to me has been the best player in the league for the better part of the last 5 to 6 years. and why they only went to one Super Bowl and why they have only gone to three conference championships. And I know Aaron Rodgers was taking a lot of heat for being considered to be toxic, for being a guy who was not a strong leader, was not a respected leader in that locker room. But I'll say this, and I thought about this even during the season, and I saw this article, and it even amplified what I thought. There's no way, if you're Aaron Rodgers, you're the quarterback, you are a guy who is at the top of your game, you're a guy who you are as smart as any quarterback in the league. There's no way you can respect a coach that you feel, number one, is incompetent as an offensive personnel, as an offensive mind, and number two, who you perceive as a guy who is not working hard enough at his profession. There's no way you can respect that coach, and there's only going to be conflict. I mean, some of the stories, the idea that Mike McCarthy was missing meetings and getting massages, allegedly getting massages, like, or the fact that Aaron Rodgers just, somebody depicted this in the story, the fact that Aaron Rodgers somebody said that Aaron Rodgers will not respect you if he thinks he's smarter than you. You think Tom Brady thinks he's smarter than Bill Belichick? Like, you think Joe Montana thought he was smarter than Bill Walsh? Like, as much as intelligent as Kobe Bryant is, speaking, I think he speaks like three languages, maybe even more. I don't think Kobe Bryant thought he was smarter than Phil Jackson. It's one of the reasons why LeBron James has had a difficult time at being coach, because he is smarter. He's such a basketball savant. He's smarter than 99% of the coaches out here, outside maybe Greg Popovich or maybe a Rick Carlisle. He's probably smarter than any coach that he's ever, or Mike Krzyzewski, somebody of that ilk. He's probably smarter than every coach that he's ever come across in his life. So of course, if I'm smart, if I think I'm smarter than you, what can you tell me? Like, what can you tell me if I feel like I'm smarter than you? And that's what we're seeing with this Aaron Rodgers, Mike McCarthy situation. And listen, all you need to know about Mike McCarthy is there were at least seven to eight job openings this year after the season was over. Mike McCarthy still doesn't have a job. This is a guy had a win percentage over 600. This is a guy who went to the playoffs at 1.8, 8 straight years, won a Super Bowl, went to multiple conference championships. His resume versus anybody else's resume that got hired, there's no comparison. I mean, it's no comparison. He's still out of work. Still out of work. So the perception around the league is clearly that he wasted Aaron Rodgers, and that his offenses and his schemes were mundane. They were archaic. You had division rivals, people from other teams within a different division calling out Green Bay's plays. So you can knock Aaron Rodgers if you want to. Aaron Rodgers this year, even in an off year, was 25-2. 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Even in that's a bad year. And I think this was a total organizational breakdown. Ted Thompson falling asleep at the wheel with the drafting. This apparently the relationship was soured between Rodgers and McCarthy, even going back to draft night 2005 when McCarthy was with the 49ers and Rodgers was passed on for one Alex Smith. That McCarthy, there a lot of people close to Rodgers think that he held that grudge against McCarthy for their entire 10 year that they were together. The bottom line is, McCarthy had one of the great quarterbacks of all time forget about generational talent. A guy who is to me, the most talented quarterback in the history of the sport. I think all around, from in terms of physical talent, arm strength, accuracy, in terms of all, brain, mental approach, in terms of everything that encompasses a quarterback. There's never been a quarterback with the complete skill set of one Aaron Rodgers. And Green Bay should have won at least minimum 2 to 3 Super Bowls over the course of the Rodgers McCarthy tenure. So, I think that it was only going to be conflict when you have a coach that's viewed by his star player as being incompetent. And, yeah, he's going to pull a Willie Beeman, changing plays in the huddle, or telling his receivers, no, run this route. I mean, think about the lack of respect you have to have for your coach, your NFL coach, to change the plays in the huddle. That is that just doesn't happen. One thing, the audibles is one thing. You changing the plays in the huddle, that does not happen. Again, that's something that LeBron would do to Luke Walton. But Luke Walton doesn't have a championship. Doesn't have an NBA championship like Mike McCarthy has a Super Bowl. So Aaron Rodgers had no respect, none whatsoever for Mike McCarthy, none. And you can't have a situation where your quarterback does not respect your coach, and that is where I blame the Green Bay brass and upper end management not recognizing that Rodgers did not respect McCarthy, or not acting on it and getting rid of McCarthy sooner, and bringing in a coach who your quarterback respected. It's one thing to dislike the coach, or to argue with the coach, or to go tit for tat with the coach in terms of not the game plan, maybe some of the stuff, maybe have a difference of philosophy, but to have zero respect for the coach. You cannot have your franchise quarterback not respecting the coach. It just cannot happen in 2019 or in today's NFL. The quarterback is too important to the team, and the quarterback is too important to the team, especially when you have a guy of Aaron Rodgers' ilk and of Aaron Rodgers' skill set. Because you're not getting rid of Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers became a free agent today, he would have, and there would be 25 to 28 teams that would be going after him full tilt. There'd be at least 25 teams. There are 32 teams in the NFL, maybe between 25 and 27 teams that would be going after him hard. So Aaron Rodgers' skill set is still highly respected over the course of in terms of the NFL. Despite all this talk of lack of leadership, and is he a coach killer? Is he toxic? Let Aaron Rodgers become a free agent, which is not going to happen. He's under contract. He's the highest, for now, the highest paid player in the league. But if he ever became a free agent, he would have his pick of who he wanted to go to. There'd be no two ways about it. Article came out in Yahoo last week in regards to Kristaps Porzingis. Now apparently, again, this is all allegedly. He sexually assaulted a woman as a New York Knick. This supposedly happened last February of 2018. Now again, the important piece about this is the fact that he was traded to Dallas, and the fact that Dallas did not do their research of this to the full extent. The Knicks, again, there are conflicting reports with the Knicks and the Mavericks in terms of who you want to believe. Knicks said that they told the Mavericks about the case and about the pending investigation. The Mavericks claim otherwise, that the only that they didn't go in, that the Knicks did not go in depth about the case. That the only word basically that came out of the case was extortion. That basically they basically said that Porzingis was being extorted. They didn't say Porzingis was being accused of sexual assault and also extortion as well. Here's the thing to know about this case. Number one, I can't blame the Knicks at all. If you are trying to acquire an asset that you view as a part of your future of your franchise, along with Luka Doncic, you better know everything about him. You better know the first time I don't know, his first pair of sneakers. It's your job as a franchise to do your due diligence, your research in terms of knowing about his not only his what he can do on the basketball court, but what's transpired off the court. Now, if you read the reports, if you read the articles on this story, it sounds like a situation where Porzingis hooks up, has sex with this young lady. He blew her off, and now the young lady is pissed off and just wanted to get some type of revenge. She claims that Porzingis promised her to pay her brother's education for $68,000. She also claims that um, that she cared about Porzingis and didn't want to hurt Porzingis because she was a Knicks fan, and not only she accusing him of rape, she's accusing him of breaking her nose, and she had to had cartilage damage, all kinds of stuff. Again, very hard to believe once money is involved. Once money is involved, it's very hard to believe a victim when you're trying to get money out of the person who allegedly raped you or assaulted you. So I don't believe, from that standpoint, her story is very hard to believe, and also the NBA, frankly, would not have even allowed this trade if they thought that there was anything to this. So that's come out over the past couple of days. The bottom line is Dallas is looking as bad as you can possibly look, considering what they have dealt with over the course with their franchise and the allegations of sexual misconduct within the organization, and then you have Mark Cuban claiming just he had no clue what was going on, no idea what's going on, him, despite the fact that he's the owner of the team. You can't have, like, all Dallas had to do in this situation was do their due diligence, and if they had done their due diligence, they would have found out that this basically that the girls, what she was saying didn't really match up and didn't really make sense. So you can go out there, you can trade for Porzingis. If anything comes out of this, if anything comes out of this, you can release him like right on the spot. You say, hey, we don't tolerate this in terms of our organization. We're going to release him. He's not going to be a part of it. If he comes out clean, he says, hey, if he comes out clean, nothing comes about this, then of course you move on with the business of having Porzingis on your team. So it was very simple for Dallas to deal with this situation. This was not a difficult situation to deal with at all. And I thought Dallas made this much harder than what it really is. And they've come off looking terrible from this situation, just looking bad altogether. Again, you can look at the details in the story and say that the girl's story is just not, it's too many holes in it. You don't allow somebody to rape you. So if somebody rapes you, they breaks your nose, and yet you still feel sorry for them, and yet they're trying to get money from them. You're trying to like still be with them. She still wanted to be with Porzingis. Like I said, this has the classic case, and knowing the classic case of, it has a sexual relationship. He blows her off. She gets upset and tries to take advantage of what's going on in society. Me Too and the whole nine, and was looking for money and also attention. But again, the Knicks, I cannot blame the Knicks whatsoever. I'm not blaming the Knicks at all. Even if the Knicks didn't share all the information, it is Dallas's job, them receiving the asset, which was Kristaps Porzingis. It's Dallas's job to do their due diligence and to know what the hell was going on. That's all it is to it from my standpoint. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast. As always, this is the 11th season of the Real Deal Podcast, telling it like it is with no apologies. Thanks for listening.